All right, let's jump right in with a big question. How resilient are our organizations really? Today, we're going to dig into the answers using the brand new resilience report for 2025 from the Business Continuity Institute. Let's get into it.
You know, the last few years have taught us all a pretty hard lesson. In a world that feels like it's in a state of constant disruption, from geopolitics to climate change, just getting back on your feet after a hit, well, that's not the goal anymore. Resilience has totally shifted from being a simple backup plan to being an absolutely essential strategic capability.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at what resilience even means today. Then, we'll dive into this huge integration challenge that everyone's facing. We'll also see where leadership is focusing and, more importantly, what they're missing. Then we'll touch on the double-edged sword that is AI, and finally wrap it up with what it actually takes to build a truly resilient future. So first things first, we have to start with the basics, because the very definition of resilience has fundamentally changed. It is no longer just about getting back up after you've been knocked down. What the BCI report is really hammering home is that modern resilience is all about being proactive, about constantly improving. It means you're weaving foresight and adaptability right into the DNA of the organization. And that's the huge mindset shift right there. Resilience isn't just defense anymore. It's a real competitive advantage.
Now, for the core problem, the one pretty much everyone is grappling with. Organizations totally get the idea of integrated resilience, but actually making it happen, well, that's where the real struggle begins.
The dream, right, is to create this seamless system where all your different protective functions, I'm talking business continuity, crisis management, cybersecurity, the whole shebang, they all work together in perfect harmony. Think of it like a giant, complex puzzle. The big question is, how many companies have actually finished it?
Just over half. That's it, 54.3%. That's the number of organizations saying their resilience functions are fully or mostly integrated. Now, look, on one hand, that is progress. But what this number really shows us is the massive gap that still exists. It means nearly half of all businesses out there are operating with some seriously dangerous internal silos.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If everyone knows that integration is the goal, why is it so darn difficult to achieve?
Well, the report breaks it down really clearly. The biggest hurdle, and we're talking over 61% of organizations here, is just a simple lack of resources. Not enough time, not enough budget, not enough people. Right behind that are those siloed systems we just talked about, and then, of course, competing priorities between departments. So the key takeaway here isn't a lack of vision, it's these deep, structural and resource challenges that are holding companies back. And, you know, this whole integration problem? It gets even worse when you look at where leadership is actually choosing to focus its attention. The data here tells a story of two very different and pretty unbalanced priorities. On one side, you have the digital world of cyber threats, and that is getting a ton of attention. But on the other, you had the physical world of supply chains, which it turns out is being dangerously overlooked. This contrast is creating a huge strategic blind spot.
Get this, an incredible 80.1% of top management has direct involvement or strategic oversight when it comes to cyber resilience. And that makes total sense, right? Given all the regulatory pressure and the constant threat of attack. But just look at this next number.
Only 31.8%. That is the percentage of executive focus on supply chain resilience. I mean, the gap between those two numbers is absolutely staggering, and it points to a very serious vulnerability.
And here's why this matters so much right now. With geopolitical tensions and climate disruptions making our supply chains more fragile than they've ever been, this leadership blind spot isn't just a small concern. It is a massive, flashing red light on the corporate dashboard.
Okay, let's talk about the big disruptor in the room, artificial intelligence. As the report shows, AI is both a powerful new tool for building resilience and, well, it's also a brand new challenge that we have to manage. It's a real double-edged sword.
Companies are definitely starting to get their hands dirty with AI. They're using it to model really complex disruption scenarios to sharpen their decision-making. But the key thing to realize here is that we're all still just scratching the surface of its true potential. So what are the top uses right now? According to the data, it's mainly about creating realistic scenarios for training exercises, analyzing what went wrong after an incident has already happened, and automating some of that tedious report generation. These are practical for sure, but they're still fairly limited applications.
And this brings us to one of the most important takeaways from the entire report. This quote really says it all. Technology should enhance, not replace, human judgment. The winning formula isn't about automating everything. It's about finding that perfect sweet spot between powerful technology and irreplaceable human expertise.
So let's bring it all together. What does the path forward actually look like? Well, it's about making a fundamental shift away from that reactive posture and moving toward a state of continuous, proactive readiness.
The report makes this incredibly powerful argument that the deepest challenge here isn't financial, it's cultural. Real, true resilience comes from building an integrated mindset that flows all the way from the boardroom down to the front line, where every single person understands their role in that larger system.
And that's really the end game here. It's about moving beyond seeing resilience as just a shield or some protective mechanism, and instead finally recognizing it for what it truly is, a measure of organizational maturity and a powerful driver of long-term strategic success. And that leaves us with one final critical question to think about. When you look at your own organization, its culture, its priorities, is it simply built to react when disaster strikes, or is it truly designed from the ground up to be resilient? The answer to that question is going to define its future.